Welcome in, everyone, to a deep dive I think you're going to really like today. We're diving into the world of Bob Camblin.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like someone handed us this treasure trove.
Yes.
We've got his quotes and his poems and even an expert breakdown of one of his watercolors, figure Faux Trap Deadfall.
Oh, wow.
So today, our mission is to really unlock Camblin's perspective on art and on life and the universe even.
It is quite the mix, isn't it?
Yeah, it
I'm
is.
excited.
It is exciting. And, it's not every day that we get to kind of go so deep with an artist. So this is going to be fun.
Definitely.
One of the first things that really jumped out at me when I was going through all this material was this quote: "Art is not just images. Art for art's sake has become art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake."
That's a big one right there.
Yeah. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think it speaks to a real shift that we've seen in art history. If you think back to movements like abstract expressionism,
Yeah.
The focus was on the artist's inner world, the purity of form. And as we move through the 20th century and beyond, art becomes so much more intertwined with social issues, political issues, ecological issues.
Right. So it becomes less about the artist and more about
Exactly.
the world around us.
It's engaging with that world. It's
Yeah.
not just self-expression anymore.
Right. And this brings us to that watercolor figure, Faux Trap Deadfall.
Oh, yes.
You've got that trap in there,
Mhm.
which is such a symbol of control, almost aggressive, in its intent.
Uh-huh.
But then you've got nature kind of fighting back with these creeping vines,
Right, nature's resilience.
showing its resilience. And I don't know why, but that really resonated with me because as a creative person myself, I always feel that tension between sticking to the plan and, letting go and letting things kind of unfold organically.
It's the dance, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
How much control do you have and how much do you
Right.
relinquish?
And Camblin seems to suggest that true creation happens somewhere in between. He says, step off the train of thought to find the power that is no power. So by letting go of control,
Right.
we tap into something much deeper.
It reminds me of another quote where he says, "When you think, don't act. When you act, don't think."
Oh, wow.
Like, stop overthinking it. Just be
Yeah.
be in the moment.
Right. And that's where this idea of the mystic switch comes in.
Oh, yeah. What is that?
It's less about, intellectual understanding and more about an instinctive knowing, He's saying go with your gut.
So it's intuition over analysis.
Exactly.
I like that. And it's interesting because in a way that connects back to some of his observations about nature.
Yeah, how so?
Well, there's that line about the hawk. He is doing what he has to do, but he's not earning a living.
Right.
He seems to admire that kind of pure instinctual existence, which I think is something we as humans really struggle with sometimes.
We get in our own way, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We overthink things, and this is where his concept of IRM comes in.
IRM.
Yeah, IRM, inner rhythm movement. And it feels like he believes that both the hawk and the artist are guided by this natural rhythm, this internal rhythm, this flow.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, so maybe tapping into that is the key to kind of flipping that mystic switch.
It makes you wonder how we do that, though, right?
Yeah. How do we access that? How do we...
Where do we even begin?
Yeah.
I mean, think about some of his Nutra poems. He talks about feeling the cool breeze even when not a leaf moves, or, being brought to his senses by rain-soaked willows.
I see what you mean. He's encouraging us to kind of be present, observe,
Yeah.
attune ourselves to those subtle rhythms of the world around us.
Yeah, maybe nature itself holds the key.
It's like going back to the source,
Exactly.
which is interesting because he also had some pretty complex
Oh, yeah.
views on communication, even some that seemed a little contradictory.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Well, like on the one hand, he says, if you argue or if you agree, you may learn, but you do not communicate.
Okay.
But then on the other hand, he writes, communications, how wonderful and how sad.
So what's the deal? Is he for it or against it?
I know it's confusing.
Mm-hmm.
So is Camblin rejecting communication altogether, or is there something more to it?
That's a good question. I think it's a lot more nuanced than a simple yes or no. I think he's not necessarily rejecting communication, but rather he's yearning for a deeper connection,
Okay.
one that goes beyond just words.
So maybe he's talking about nonverbal communication.
That's possible. I mean, think about it. He was fascinated by drawing and haiku.
Right.
Maybe he saw those forms as a way to bypass the limits of language.
And get to something more.
More visceral, more direct.
Right. So art becomes this universal language
It could be.
capable of transmitting things that words just can't.
Powerful thought, isn't it?
Yeah, and is that maybe why he was so concerned about what he called disposable art culture?
You think so?
Yeah, was he worried that this deeper form of communication was getting lost?
Interesting point.
Because there's that quote where he says, the viewer demands new techniques from the artist if he is watching him for a period of time.
Right.
It almost sounds like he felt pressured to constantly kind of reinvent himself, just to keep people
So to
engaged.
stay relevant.
Yeah, and that must have been a source of frustration for an artist like him who was so committed to exploring these deeper themes and ideas.
It makes you wonder how he dealt with that tension, right?
Yeah. Did he give into it, or did he find a way to stay true to his own vision?
That's what we need to figure out.
That's what we're going to explore next.
Yeah.
It seems like he was walking this tightrope, trying to balance his own artistic vision with what the art world expected of him.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing.
Did he find that balance?
He did, and in a really inspiring way. I think, he never compromised on his vision, but he also didn't shy away from experimenting and pushing those boundaries.
Okay, so he found a way to kind of evolve but stay true to himself.
Exactly.
At the same time, huh? And I wonder if that connects at all to his fascination with mirrors and magic.
Ooh, interesting connection. Tell me more.
Well, I keep thinking about that line, everyone is a mirror, and that is magic. It feels so central to his whole philosophy.
It does. He saw this deep interconnectedness in everything, a reflection of the universe in each of us.
This is like we're all part of this bigger tapestry or something.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, each thread kind of reflecting and influencing the others.
And art becomes a way to kind of tap into that interconnectedness.
To reveal those hidden connections, show us the magic in the everyday.
Okay, that makes sense. And it reminds me of his whole concept of the hologram.
The whole message.
Yeah, but that can be kind of a tough one to grasp,
It can be abstract, yeah.
How would you explain that to someone who's like never encountered Camblin's work before?
Well, think about like a family unit. Okay, each member is an individual, but together they create something much bigger than themselves.
Okay.
Or think about the internet, this huge network of connections, each node contributing to the whole flow of information.
So it's about seeing those connections, even the ones that aren't so obvious.
Right, recognizing that we're all part of this larger system.
And that ties back into his whole thing about believing versus knowing, right?
You're catching on.
He talks about mystics who know something else, something beyond logic and belief systems.
Oh, because you talking about that quote where he says, most people practice a belief or a religion. They were raised in mystics, know something else. They remain connected to a faith or abandon it, but they have been somewhere and logic won't make the trip. One must look for the balance of intuition and logic.
Yeah, that one, it's like he's saying true understanding comes from experience, from trusting your gut.
Intuition over intellect.
Exactly. And maybe that's what he's trying to do with his art.
Yeah.
Help us access that deeper knowing, bypass the limits of logic.
Tap into something more primal, more intuitive.
Yeah. And it's so cool how he weaves together all these different threads, art and nature and communication and even spirituality.
He sees the connections where most of us don't.
Right. But there's also this sense of urgency, this concern about where things are headed, both in the art world and in society as a whole.
Yeah. He was definitely a man of his time, very aware of the changes happening around him.
And that brings us back to his critique of disposable art culture.
Right.
How did he navigate that tension between creating art that was meaningful, but also engaging in a world that seems so obsessed with what's new and trendy?
It's a question a lot of artists struggle with, I think.
Did he have any answers? So we've got this artist, grappling with this disposable art culture.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder if he felt like he was kind of shouting into the void sometimes,
I think there was definitely a sense of frustration there.
Yeah.
Remember that line where he talks about mastering a technique and then realizing that novelty is what really drives the art market? It must have felt like this constant pressure, to keep innovating just to stay afloat.
Right, just to keep people's attention.
Yeah, and that's a tough spot for any artist to be in.
It is, because you're kind of forced to choose between chasing trends and staying true to your own vision,
Exactly.
your own voice.
And it makes you wonder, what really makes art last? What makes it endure?
Yeah, is it just about the shock of the new, or is there something deeper?
Something that speaks to the human experience across time and cultures.
Yeah, I think Camblin's work really points to that deeper something.
It does.
He takes these everyday observations, these moments of insight, and he turns them into something profound.
Yeah, he elevates the ordinary.
He does, and he holds up this mirror to our own lives, you know?
Yeah.
He's like urging us to see the beauty and the magic that we often miss.
To pay attention, to open our eyes.
Right, like wake up, the world is full of wonder if you just know how to look.
And I think that's his call to action. He doesn't want us to be passive consumers of art.
Oh, so it's more than just appreciating it.
It's about engaging with it, letting it challenge us, change our perspective.
So it's almost like a transformative experience.
Yeah, it can be intellectual, emotional, even spiritual. It's about taking those insights and applying them to our own lives.
So how do we do that? How do
Yeah.
we find our own version of that mystic switch?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I don't think there's one right answer.
Yeah.
But Camblin's work gives us some clues. It encourages us to explore, to question, to really look at the world with fresh eyes.
To trust our intuition. That is our intellect.
He reminds us that everyone is a mirror, and that is magic.
It's such a simple idea,
Yeah,
but so powerful.
it really is. And once you start to see the world that way, the possibilities are endless.
So I guess as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin,
Yeah.
I'm left with this feeling of inspiration, but also a challenge.
How so?
Well, inspiration from his dedication to his art,
Mm-hmm.
but also this challenge to bring that same kind of wonder and curiosity to my own life.
I think that's a challenge worth taking on.
It is. And, Camblin himself said, I didn't learn anything new, but I know a lot more now.
It's about connecting the dots, isn't it?
Yeah. And maybe that's his greatest legacy, reminding us that true knowledge comes from experience, from observation.
From keeping that mystic switch flipped on.
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and who knows, maybe you'll find a little bit of Camblin's magic in your own life.